Okay, in this video, I'm going to cover Chapter 4, the forms of business ownership in your business principles course. So I'm going to use the set of notes I've given you, and I've put my notes out in the margins, so maybe that will help you as you go along, and I'll post this set of notes so you'll have it. So at the top of the page, very simply, there are 3 types of ownership, and there are variations on some of these. But sole proprietorships, partnerships, and corporations. And just in a nutshell, sole proprietor is a one-person owned business. Partnership is 2 or more people going into business together. And a corporation, of course, is an entity of itself where it's owned by stockholders. So this whole chapter just breaks those different types of ownership down, gives you the advantages and disadvantages of each one, and then it covers some other different types of ownership that might be interesting to you. So anyway, let's cover sole proprietors here. But by the way, my notes out here, what kinds of things would you need to ask yourself before you go into business? Well, definitely you need to know what kind of business, a sole proprietorship, partnership, or corporation you want to start. And a lot of that's going to be determined by who's going to have liability for what if things go wrong, who's going to be liable for the to creditors, and who's going to be liable if someone sues the business. So liability, financing, how are you going to get your financing for the business? We'll talk about that some more. If you're going to have partners or not, where you're going to be located, so all kinds of things to cover or to think about when you are going to start your own business. But this chapter is basically dealing with what form of ownership you want to have. So let's start with the simplest one first, the sole proprietor. So a business that is established, owned, and operated and financed by one person. So one person owns the business. Notice out here, I said it's the most popular form of business ownership. 72% of all businesses are in the U.S. are sole proprietorship. So we have a lot of small businesses in the U.S. And so one person business, what would be the advantage of doing that? Well, I've given you several here. In a sole proprietorship, you don't have to have a charter from the state like a corporation would have to have. There's no legal documents to have to draw up. So basically, you start the business, and anytime you want to, you can dissolve the business. Of course, you may have some contracts that are out there or whatever that you have to fulfill, but as far as starting the business and ending the business, sole proprietorship is the easiest one. And of course, you may have to have a license to do a certain thing. So your particular profession may have to have a license to operate, but and you would have to identify in the county you're working in. You would have to pay taxes. So in other words, it's easiest, but still there are some things you would have to do. All profits essentially belong to the owner. Well, that is true. You're taking some of those profits and you're paying your employees, or taking some money and paying your employees. You're taking some profits and plowing it back into the business to buy new equipment or new buildings or whatever it might be. But you have the, as a sole proprietor, you have the discretion of what's done with those funds. You have control of the business. And of course, this is the main thing that people like about being a business owner, a sole proprietor, is that you don't have to consult with anybody else. You have no partners, you have no board of directors. So you're the one making all the decisions. There are no special taxes. So this is important. How are you taxed in a sole proprietorship? Well, it's just done on your personal income tax. So if you make a profit in the business, at the end of the year, you pay tax on it on your personal income tax. You don't have a lot of regulations like you would have in a corporation, so that's an advantage. So over here on the far right says, from a legal standpoint, the sole proprietor and the company are one and the same, making the business owner personally liable for all debts the company incurs, even if they exceed the company's value. the owner may need to sell other property. So think about that. If you are going to go bankrupt, how are you going to be able to pay for all the debts that your company has? Well, that's the problem with being a sole proprietor. That's the disadvantage, is that you have unlimited liability. In other words, they can come seize your personal assets to pay for, the debts of the company. So, your personal money, your car, your house, whatever it might be, might need to be liquidated to be able to pay for the debts of the company. So this is the main disadvantage right here, is that you as a sole proprietor would have unlimited liability. You would have a harder time raising capital than, partners. You'd have more than one person that would be trying to raise money to start the business. So this is important. Most sole proprietors finance their startup costs from their own savings. Most people save money. They're working in a particular industry for years and years. They save their money up, and they take that money and they go start their own business somewhere. They already know how to do it. The work, for example, they just have to come up with their own idea, location. So anyway, usually comes from savings, because banks are unwilling to lend them large sums of money. They don't have as much capital to back up their loan, or to back up what they're going to borrow and what they're going to spend. So not enough collateral. So that's why I wrote that over here. Why banks might not be willing to lend you or someone a lot of money to start a business. You probably will have to put in a lot of it on your own if you want to start your own sole proprietorship. Of course, you're only one person, so you don't have as much managerial experience as a corporation can hire people to handle the places where other areas that are deficient. So that's a disadvantage. Hard to find quality employees sometimes in an area when where you are, and you're small, so you don't pay as much as maybe in the Dallas area, and you're here in Panola County, for example. So it might be hard to find quality employees. A lot of times you have to train your own employees. This is a big one, personal time commitment. I mean, a lot of people think I'm just going to have more time because I own my own business. And in reality, you're working 10-hour days and up, trying to keep your business going. So it takes a lot of time to make one of these things fly. And then the length of life, if you retire, you die, you're declared incompetent. We cover all this stuff in the business law course. But if you are no longer able to run the business, then the business doesn't exist. So the life of the business is really dependent upon you, the person who owns the business. Okay, so notice over here on the side, it's a temporary choice. A lot of businesses start out as sole proprietorships, and then they want to get bigger, and they take on partners or become an LLC. And we'll talk about more of that stuff later. But a lot of times it's a temporary choice. Although you saw 72% of businesses are sole proprietorships. Okay, so what if you want to have a little more capital to start out with, or more expertise, or you and another person have an idea to start a business? You can start a partnership. So 2 or more people operating a business for profit. About 10% of businesses in the U.S. are partnerships. There are some problems with partnerships, so that's why the percentage is so low. There's some disadvantages to it. So here we've got 2 types of partnerships, or you can be 2 types of partners, I guess, 1 of 2 types. You can be a general partner. You could have a general partnership where all partners share in the day-to-day management of the business and in the profits. They co-own the assets. Each partner has unlimited liability. Okay, so if you're a general partner, you're actually working in the business, and maybe you're good at sales, or maybe you're good at op management, or logistics, or whatever it might be. And so that's your part of the job. You're part of the business. And so you come every day and you do that job. But again, each one of you has unlimited liability, just like in a sole proprietorship, where the owner has unlimited liability, the general partners would all have unlimited liability. So responsible for the debts, responsible for suits against the company, stuff like that. So what if you didn't want to have unlimited liability? Well, you could just buy into a partnership and you could become a limited partner. So a limited partnership has at least one general partner, someone that will take responsibility and liability for whatever goes wrong. And then the rest of the partners can be limited partners who just buy in. And, the most that these people can lose is their investment. So, if somebody came to you and had a great idea and said, okay, we'll pay, if you pay us $10,000 to become a limited partner, you get this share of the profits, So you could certainly become a limited partner, limit your liability in the company. So the main thing here is you have to have at least one general partner. So you can have more than one, but you have to have at least one general partner, and then the other folks can be limited partners. Okay, so advantages and disadvantages. So again, partnerships are pretty easy to start. Don't have a lot of legal requirements, but I would suggest you have articles of partnership drawn up. So over here it says an article of partnership is just a partnership agreement. They're not required, but I recommend you have one. Partnership agreement, the partners agree orally or written to share in profits. And of course, it'd be better if it's written. You want it written down so that later, let's say 3 years later, you have a disagreement about what the partnership agreement said. You can always go back to it. So spells out the terms and conditions of the partnership. I wrote down some things that should be in there. The name of the partnership, its purpose, how much did you contribute? So, you don't want to have an issue later. Well, did he give $50,000 or did he give $40,000? Does he have, is he supposed to take out 30% of the profits or 25% of the profits? There's always issues of remembering what happens. So, so that's the contributions, responsibilities, and duties of each person. That's great. You need that in there. How people are going to be compensated. So, you would get a salary probably for the job you're doing. And then what about profits at the end of the year? What percent the profits come to you? How do we add new partners? How do we sell the partnership? How do we close it down, dissolve it at the end? So there's got to be some information in there in the articles of partnership that kind of spells all this stuff out so that later you don't have an argument and have to go to court over the whole thing. The best time to draft a partnership is at the beginning, of course. And so articles of partnership don't have to be, it doesn't have to be filed with anybody, the state or federal government. You just have to have one up just so that you can have it on hand for yourself. And if you had to go to court to prove something. Okay, so articles of partnership is an advantage, really. Availability of capital. Of course, there's more than one of you. And so again, just like a partnership, sole proprietorship, a partnership is going to get most of their startup money from their own funds. So you might highlight that. Diversity of skills and expertise. There's more than one of you, so you have different things that you're good at. No special taxes. Again, this is really important. Each partner is taxed only on his or her share of the profits. So of course you'd be taxed as an employee as on your share of the salary, on your salary that you make. But at the end of the year, if you're responsible for 30% of the profits, that's going to be on your personal tax return, just like if you were a sole proprietor. Okay, and then relatively free from government control. Again, doesn't have, just like a sole proprietorship, doesn't have a lot of government regulations. Okay, again, what the disadvantage of a partnership is the people that are general partners now have unlimited liability. So right here. Each general partner is legally and personally responsible for the debts and the actions of the general partners. Okay, so you might want to highlight that. That'd be a good one to put in there in your notes, highlight it. So on the far right over here, I put some information. All general partners have unlimited liability for the debts of the business. Many states now allow the formation of limited liability partnerships, LLPs. We'll talk about LLCs, limited liability corporations and partnerships later. But if you want to be protected from the debts and the actions of your other partners, you need to have limited liability. You need to either be a limited partner or be in a limited liability partnership. And you'll have to do some more reading on that if you want to be in something like that with an LLP. I don't know. I don't have a lot of information on LLPs. I just know why they're there, why they're available. Potential for disagreements between the partners. This is a big one. If your partner just all of a sudden decides not to come to work for a week, or you find out your partner's in Cabo or somewhere, and a person could just not live up to the expectations of the other partner. You may want to go a different direction with the company, and you can't get the other partner or partners to agree with that. So that's a real disadvantage. Of course, you have more than yourself to consider. Of course, sharing the profits, they're not all yours, and then figuring out how to end partnership. So those all could be disadvantages. But again, probably the two biggest ones are these two that I've mentioned here: unlimited liability and the potential to have a disagreement and have to bust up the partnership. Okay, third type is a corporation. So a corporation is a little different. It's a legal entity with an existence and life separate from its owners. The owners are the stockholders, the people that invest in the corporation, who therefore are not personally liable for its debts. So the owners, you want to write this down in your notes. The owners are the stockholders. And so if a company goes bankrupt, if a company is sued, the investors are not going to lose any more than what they invested. So if they invested $5,000, if they bought $5,000 worth of stock, that's the most they could lose. Okay, so that's a little different from the owners of a sole proprietorship or the owners of a partnership. So a corporation is chartered by the state you're in, and each state has their own set of regulations and things to do to obtain a charter from the state. Of course, you'd have to work with the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, if you want to offer stock in your business, sell stock. So this is the thing I wanted you to see is it's an artificial person. The corporation is an artificial person. You can own property. You can enter into contracts. You can sue and be sued. You can engage in business. So the company itself, the corporation itself, just think of it. Well, that is a person that can be sued. That is a person that can go into contracts with other businesses. Okay. So 18% of businesses are corporations, but notice they generate 81% of the total revenue. So over here on the side, I wrote down some information on, what are the biggest U.S. companies in revenue. Of course, Walmart is huge. $600 billion they brought in revenue last year. Amazon, Apple, ExxonMobil. I don't know. I probably put something else in here. Oh, here are the top corporations in Texas. So McKesson, you may not know that company. It's a healthcare provider, I think. ExxonMobil, AT&T, Dell, these companies in Texas, big companies. So I put some links out there if you want to read more about that. So anyway, the numbers that you would need to know on percentages, remember 72% are sole proprietorships, 10% are partnerships, 18% are corporations. And just know that corporations, of course, bring in the most revenue. A person who buys stock in a corporation is a stockholder. As a stockholder, you get 1 vote per share if you're a common stockholder. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. So you go to the stockholders meetings and get to vote your shares. There are 2 types really of corporations. It can be closed or open. So I didn't highlight that. I should have. The closed corporations whose stock is owned by relatively few people. So you need to highlight that, owned by relatively few people and is not bought or sold on a securities exchange. So what I'm talking about, it's not sold on the New York Stock Exchange, or it's not sold on the NASDAQ. So there are several companies, I say a lot, there are a number of companies that are this way, but most of them are open corporations. So an open corporation is sold on the stock exchanges to the general public. So if you wanted to buy stock in Walmart, you could buy stock in Walmart today and hold on to it as long as you want, and then you could sell it off whenever the price goes up, or hold on to it forever and will it to your grandchildren or whatever you wanted to do. So I gave you some examples here of a couple of closed corporations. Mars is probably the biggest, the one that is the best example. Mars bars, candy bars, 100% family owned. So that stock is not sold out to the general public. It's sold only to the family. It's all in the family. And of course, they have complete control of the company that way. So closed and open. So just know most companies are open corporations where stock is sold on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, for example. Okay. Process of forming a corporation is incorporation. So you can incorporate in any state, but some states have really lenient tax laws and the ability to cut you breaks on your taxes, property taxes, for example. And so Delaware, even though I wrote that over, well, maybe I didn't write it over here. Delaware is a lot of times a place where people or companies will incorporate, since it has such lenient tax laws and all, but they may actually do business in Texas, for example. So anyway, you need to incorporate where you think it's most advantageous for your business, but you need to know these 3 right here. A business that incorporates in the state where it operates is a domestic corporation. So if you are in Texas, operating in Texas, and you incorporate in Texas and you operate here, you're a domestic corporation. But what if you incorporate in Texas and you go across the line and you're operating over in Louisiana? Well, that's called a foreign corporation, even though it's not in our thinking foreign. It's not foreign like another country, but you're foreign to that state. And then what if you incorporated in Texas, but you operated in Mexico? You would be an alien corporation. So, or vice versa, if you incorporate in Mexico and operate in Texas. So you're just operating in a whole nother country. Okay, so domestic versus foreign versus alien. Make sure you put that in your notes. Highlight that in your notes. It'll definitely be on the test. So you come up with an articles of incorporation, or it's called a corporate charter. It's what you usually hear it called, a corporate charter. And it's basically a contract between you and the state. And here's some things that you would put in it. I'll see if I can get the whole thing up here. You'd have the name of your corporation, your goals, how much stock you're going to issue. Of course, you'd be going through the SEC to do that if you decided to do that. How long you want the corporation to last, which you want it to last in perpetuity or perpetual forever. Minimum investment by owners, how much everybody put in. Some methods of transferring the shares of stock, and then an address of the company, names and addresses of the board of directors. So You apply to the state to become a corporation in that state, and they issue a corporate charter so you can operate here. Okay, so corporations can issue two kinds of stock. There's common stock and preferred stock. So if you're a common stockholder, you vote on corporate matters, but you receive dividends only after the preferred stockholders. I've only ever bought common stock. I've never bought any preferred stock. But if you are a common stockholder, you get to vote one vote for one share for each share that you own at the stockholders meeting. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage is they're going to pay dividends out to preferred stockholders first. So down here where it says preferred stock, they usually don't have any voting rights. That's their disadvantage, but they get paid dividends first. So not every company pays dividends, but at the end of the year, if a company has made a profit and is issued a dividend, the common stockholders would get paid, but only after the preferred stockholders if the company had issued preferred stock. So know the difference here. So you'll know on the test, I'll probably ask you this question. What's the advantage to being a common stockholder, or what's the disadvantage? And same thing for preferred stock. So you have to have one stockholders meeting a year, at least one. Most companies have one. And, the stockholders meeting might be in New York or Houston or wherever it is. And a lot of people do attend, but maybe I can't get there. Maybe I only have 10 shares and, I'm not going down to Houston for a stockholders meeting. So you can vote by proxy. So they'll send you in the mail or either in your email a way to vote electronically without having to attend the meeting. So that's voting by proxy. Okay, so what's the structure look like on a corporation? Well, the corporation has stockholders as its owners. Okay, so I put this little graphic. This is out of your textbook over here on the side, but the stockholders are the owners of the company. They vote on a board of directors. So then you notice it says they elect a board of directors. The board of directors then appoint a group of officers. So you notice I have president, vice president, treasurer, secretary. This could be a CEO. This could be a CFO, chief financial officer. This could be a chief organization officer. So anyway, lots of officers, and those CEOs end up hiring management and hiring the people that actually work for them. So this right here is important. You can read about the board of directors and officers over here, but this structure, the stockholders elect a board of directors. The board of directors, they govern the corporation. They make decisions about all the things that the corporation is going to do if they want to branch out to another city, if they want to, whatever they want to do. So the board of directors, the corporation is owned by the stockholders. They elect the board of directors. They appoint the officers. And then they hire the employees, management employees. So this whole little thing right here is something you want to highlight really for test purposes. Okay, so what's the advantages and disadvantages of being in a corporation? Well, if you're in a corporation, if you're a stockholder, you have limited liability. You're only going to lose what you invested, what stock you bought. It's easy to sell stock, so you can sell it today. You can buy some more tomorrow, whatever you need to do. So you can either, if you buy some more tomorrow, you become even more of an owner in the company. Unlimited life, it just keeps going. No matter if, like the president resigns or retires, the corporation just keeps right on going. And they can issue more stock and they can issue bonds for whatever projects they're working on. Here's the main disadvantage. It's double taxation. So it says, unlike sole proprietorships and partnerships, the corporation itself must pay taxes on its profits. So the business itself pays taxes on what they make. But then a certain amount of salary is paid to the president. A certain amount of salary is paid to a manager in the company. What do? Well, they go home and they pay on their personal taxes for their salary, their income tax. But what if you're a stockholder in that company? They are issued possibly a dividend, capital gains at the end of the year, and you're going to have to pay taxes on those dividends. So here the taxes have been paid on the profits. Then it's issued to stockholders, and then they pay taxes on those profits. So it's double taxation. That is a disadvantage. They're complex or to start because you have to come up with a corporate charter and all the government regs for issuing stock or bonds or whatever. And then, of course, about all the business regulations are aimed at corporations. So more government restrictions. On the far right over here, I'm giving you some information. A corporation must register in the state where it does business, must register with the SEC before selling stock to the public. So there are a lot of costs associated with starting a corporation. And so I just kind of listed that over to the side. Well, what if you wanted to start a corporation or move from a partnership to a corporation, for example, but you didn't want the double taxation problem, the main disadvantage. Well, you could go start an S corporation, or you could start an LLC. And so I gave you both of those here. The difference is in an S corporation, by the way, a regular corporation is called a C corporation. But if you want to start an S corporation, it's organized like a corporation with stockholders, investors, officers, but it's taxed like a partnership. Okay, must have fewer than 100 investors. The investors must be individuals. There's just going to be one class of stock that's issued. So for instance, they're just going to issue common stock, and it must be a domestic corporation, must be in the United States. So this is something to think about. If you wanted to avoid double taxation, where the corporation is taxed and then you dole out the profits to stockholders and then they're taxed, you could set up an S corporation. So this would avoid that problem. Here's the limitation, I guess. The main limitation is you can only issue stock to 100 people. So there would be a maximum 100 owners, basically, of the company. But that's one way around the double taxation. Another way around it is a limited liability company. So offers the same liability protection as a corporation, but may be taxed as either a sole proprietor or a partnership to avoid double taxation. The difference here is, notice it doesn't have this 100 investor limit. So I put you some information over here about that. The LLC is the hot thing, I guess, for people to do now. So again, your company would be responsible for debts. Your company would be responsible for lawsuits. But when it comes to taxation, you as an investor would get dividends and be taxed on that, or parts of the profit and be taxed on that, and the company wouldn't. So I put some more information about that over on the side if you want to go into the link and read more about starting an LLC. Okay, some other types of business ownerships, co-ops. You can read more about co-ops. A lot of those we see in agriculture. So a legal entity with several Corporate features such as limited liability, unlimited lifespan, board of directors, administrative staff, member owners pay annual fees to co-ops and share in the profits, which are distributed to members in proportion to their contributions. Because they do not retain profits, they're not subject to taxes. So you, as the person receiving the profits, you would pay taxes on it, not the co-op. So I wrote down here, I gave you a bunch of them or several of them, but you can go in and look at more different co-ops. But you can see like Land O'Lakes butter, Ocean Spray, juices, Sunkist oranges, stuff like that. Here's Blue Diamond is almond growers. So they go into a co-op a lot of times for the marketing part of it. They can do combined pay in, and they combine all their money to do some kind of national marketing. But anyway, a co-op is one way to type of business, different type of business ownership. We've talked about joint ventures before, so two companies could go into business together to make a certain thing, a specific project that they're working on. And once that project is over, the joint venture goes away. And we've seen car companies do that, for example, and produce a vehicle, and it goes on for several years and then it goes away. You might want to start a franchise. So a licensed to operate a business using another party's trademark, logo, or business name and method of doing business. And so you would think that gives you a head start. You've got a name, a trademark, a logo, and all the processes for how to make that burger or whatever it is already figured out for you. So if you take on a franchise, you're the franchisee. So right here, let's see, franchising is the granting of the franchise to a franchisee. The franchisor is the company, supplies the product concept and the methods. The franchisee is the individual. I don't know if you've learned this before in business law. Hopefully some of y'all are picking this up if you're in business law. But whenever you have an EE on the end, that's the person that's receiving something. So a franchisee is the person that's receiving a franchise. Okay, so a franchise agreement. This is important here. Contract allowing the franchisee to use the franchisor's name, trademark, logo, methods of doing business. Okay, the franchisee, that'd be us, you, the person that's bought the franchise, supplies the land, labor, and capital, operates the business, agrees to abide by the franchise agreement. The franchisor, the one that's selling the franchise, supplies a known and advertised business name, management skills, required training materials, and method of doing business. Okay, so if you wanted to start a franchise, you'd apply to the main company to see if they if you wanted to start I wrote down here Chick-fil-A, for example. So you'd apply, and they have a very rigorous process for how they vet possible franchisees. But you'd apply and you'd agree to use all their methods, the way they do business, and you would come up with a location. They would come up with a location. Actually, the franchisor would. You would pay for the land, the building, the equipment, all that stuff. Get your employees. They'd get employees in there and get them trained. So the franchisor can help you with tons of stuff, but when it comes to the money for putting into it, you're really putting a lot of money in there. So here's some advantages. The main advantage is you get to use their name, product, concept. So that's probably the main advantage you need to know here. When it comes to disadvantages, you've got to pay a royalty fee. So sometimes every time there's a franchise fee that you pay to take on the franchise, but then there's a certain percent of your profits that go back to the company, to the franchisor, as a royalty fee. Sometimes it's advertising fee where you're paying in, everybody, all these little franchisees are paying in, and then all that money is used to do national advertising during the Super Bowl or something. So that's always a disadvantage. You have to pay a one-time franchise fee and then royalties. You got to follow the agreement. You can't just take off and do stuff on your own. You have to use their advertising, their promotions, all kinds of stuff like that. Put in long hours. This is a big one, especially you can read the stuff about Chick-fil-A, but Chick-fil-A is ranked number 8 on the top franchises there, increasing stores by 4% every year, about 120 new stores every year in the U.S., but their sales are going up 21% every year. So the initial investment of the franchise fee is $10,000, which doesn't seem like a lot of money, but look at what you'd have to build the building and get the land and build the building and put in all the equipment. Somewhere between 400,000 and 2.7 million. The main disadvantage of, I guess, Chick-fil-A is the person who's the franchisee has to work in the business and works long hours every day. So anyway, you can read more about, you can click on the link and go to all the top 500 franchises, and you can look and see what's available out there. And you can go to Chick-fil-A if you want to see what they do as far as franchising goes. But there's franchises all over the place. And it takes a little investment, a lot of investment really, and a lot of your time to make it work. So the question is, is that a better deal than just starting a sole proprietorship or starting a partnership or an LLC? Well, I put you some information here about how franchises have paralleled the growth of the fast food industry. So that's, as fast food industry grows, then you see more few or less franchises out there. But in the book and other places you'll hear, well, starting a franchise is a lot easier than just starting your own business because you already have, the proven methods of that company and the name of that company and stuff. And that may be true, but it's not proven. So I'll put this over here. This statement is highly debatable. Many articles cite 90 to 95% success rate. Well, that seems like it's a slam dunk, right? If you start a franchise, you're going to have success. You're going to make money like crazy. But that's not really true. Some research has shown only 65% survive over 4 years. So I cannot say this statement here is exactly proven. Okay. You would think it, just logically, you would think that a franchise would be more successful than a regular business, but how much more successful might be the question to ask. Okay, there are other ways companies can get into business together. They could merge. Two companies could merge. So right here, when two or more firms combine to form a new company. So we might have a merger. And I've given you 3 different ways companies can merge. So a horizontal merger, companies at the same stage of the industry merge together. So I gave you something like Exxon merged with Mobil, both in the oil and gas industry. They merged to form ExxonMobil. Well, that's just horizontal merger. A vertical merger would be picking up someone that's at a different level. So a company buys a firm that's in the same industry, but it's in an earlier or later stage of the production or sales process. So I wrote down a good example here, like Buffalo Wild Wings. If they purchased a chicken wing supplier, then that would be vertical, up and down, right, in the chain. So that's an example of a vertical merger. And then a conglomerate, these are unrelated businesses altogether. So I put in like, what if Disney purchased AT&T? Disney is in entertainment, but it's in a different kind of setup or different kind of business than AT&T, which is over here providing internet service or wireless service or TV, direct TV or whatever. So anyway, now that these are getting really close, a lot closer together, that's probably not the best example of a conglomerate, but if you had a company that's in oil and gas and they buy a company that's in food production, That's a conglomerate. They're totally unrelated businesses. All right, so two companies could merge together, and we've seen a lot of mergers over the years. You hear talk about mergers and acquisitions. Every year you see the articles about that. So an acquisition is when a corporation or investor group finds a target company, negotiates with its board of directors to purchase it. And sometimes they can purchase the company for so much per share. And so the stockholders end up being stockholders of a new company. And sometimes the board of directors does not want to, or the investors do not want to negotiate with this company. They don't want to be taken over. And so this is called a hostile takeover. And so I gave you some information on how that could happen. So the board of directors or management of the company being acquired disapprove of the merger or acquisition. This is called a hostile takeover. And so they can vote to not allow the company to be taken over. But if you were, let's say your stock was selling at $25 a share, and the company trying to take over offers, $50 a share, double your money, you might vote to be taken over. So anyway, this happened a lot during the 80s. We had a lot of corporate hostile takeovers, and what would happen was these corporate raiders would come in, buy up the company, and then they would take and sell off pieces of the company and end up making more money on the company as pieces than it was as a whole. So what did a lot of the boards do? Well, they set up things in their charter, in their bylaws, like poison pills, shark repellents, golden parachutes. So you could put something in like a poison pill that said, if this company is taken over, that all the stockholders will be given 3 shares for every one they had, or something, something that would make the company that's taken over them step back. In golden parachute, if a company is taken over, they a lot of times they will let go the chief executives, the officers in the company. And when they do, if you had this built into your bylaws that you were going to give them, this exorbitant amount of money to leave, maybe they would think twice about taking over the company. So anyway, you can read more about that and go out on the internet and read more about that. I put some mergers and acquisitions over here on the side. This happened in 2022. Microsoft, you might have heard this, where they've taken or bought out Activision Blizzard, $69 billion. So they're a video game maker, so like Call of Duty, Candy Crush, Warcraft. So this one's not been approved yet. This happened in 2022, and it's still going on now. You saw this one all over the news. Elon Musk bought out Twitter, $44 billion. So anyway, there's lots of mergers and acquisitions that happen during the year, but some of them are really big, and most of them are just really smaller, and we never see much about them. Okay, so that's some information on chapter 4. I'm going to post this video and then my notes right below it, so you can get to them if you need them.